All right, everyone, welcome back to our little series here. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the two render engines that you have available with V-Ray. Because yes, there's two of them, and while they do produce similar looking results, it is important to be aware of the fact that they are two different render engines. Now, one render engine is the V-Ray render engine, while the other is the V-Ray GPU render engine. V-Ray is the CPU version, meaning it does all of its calculations on the CPU. V-Ray GPU, on the other hand, works primarily on GPUs, although CPUs are supported as well through hybrid rendering. Now, in terms of feature sets, V-Ray is known for its extensive set of features and it supports everything, whereas V-Ray GPU doesn't quite fully support everything that you will find in V-Ray. The developers, however, are working on closing the remaining gap. Which one you should pick depends on, well, you and the kind of projects you do and the kind of hardware you're invested in or want to be invested in. If you're heavy on the CPU hardware, if you need all the features or are working on really large scenes, well then V-Ray is probably your best choice. On the other hand, if you've got a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs, because yes, currently only NVIDIA hardware is supported, and if you aren't working with really large scenes, which I guess doesn't quite matter as much if you've got a ton of VRAM, or for example, if you simply prefer the typically faster / more power efficient rendering speeds of GPUs, well then maybe V-Ray GPU is the better fit for you. Very broadly speaking, V-Ray is often considered as the fullest renderer, but CPUs are a little harder to scale as you can't quite fit many of them into one single computer, although arguably you could say much the same for modern GPUs, I suppose. And V-Ray GPU, on the other hand, is often considered to be a bit more interactive speed-wise compared to V-Ray, because GPUs, especially in simpler scenes, tend to render faster, especially if you look at how much a high-end GPU costs compared to a high-end CPU. But all that said, as with any tech these days, these things are sort of in a flux and it's hard to make a proper one-to-one comparison, right? Ultimately, it's your choice and V-Ray gives you the ability to choose. Now, for what it's worth, I will mainly be working on a 64-core Threadripper throughout this series here. Okay, now at this point, maybe just as a little bit of a note, with V-Ray GPU, you can also do something called hybrid rendering, which means you can leverage both your GPUs and CPUs to do the rendering. This is a rather unique feature, as you can imagine, and it can come especially in handy if, for example, you're transitioning your workflows or render farms even from CPUs to GPUs or vice versa. Besides that, it obviously also gives you the ability to use both your GPUs and CPUs to render out a single image, which, as you can imagine, does have some speed benefits, right? Although, that said, do keep in mind that hybrid rendering on CPU, generally speaking, isn't as fast or as power efficient as it's rendering with V-Ray, because V-Ray is especially optimized for CPUs. So there is a performance difference that is expected there. Now, in case you do want to do hybrid rendering, you're first going to want to select your rendering devices in the V-Ray GPU device selection app. So to bring up the app, just hit the Windows button on your keyboard and then type in select, and that should present you with the select devices for V-Ray GPU rendering app. You just click on it, and then what you can do is you can just select the device you want to do GPU rendering on whenever you're in CUDA mode, of course, because this does not work for the RTX mode, right? With the RTX mode, you can only render on GPUs. When in CUDA mode, you can do hybrid rendering, okay? Now, you can also decide which device will do denoising. So we only have one GPU here. We're going to want this one to do the denoising. And because we only have one graphics card in this workstation, we're also going to take this low priority button here, which is just going to make the rendering experience a bit more interactive and pleasant. Now, once you've done that, you can open up Blender, make sure that the V-Ray engine here is set to V-Ray GPU, and then also make sure that this Use RTX checkbox here is unchecked. And just like that, you're going to be doing hybrid rendering. Now, for a more detailed comparison of the two render engines, do check out our documentation pages and our blog posts. We'll have some interesting links in the description of this video, and we would really recommend you give them a look, okay? Okay, Now, ultimately, depending on the render engine you pick, the render settings will change accordingly because remember, these are two different render engines after all, right? And since V-Ray GPU doesn't quite fully support everything that V-Ray does, do note that the UI won't hide those features for you, meaning there will be situations where you will try using a functionality of some sorts, but the rendering won't update as expected, and that might be because that feature isn't quite fully supported on the V-Ray GPU just yet. So do keep that in mind, please. And also keep in mind that the developers are trying to narrow the remaining gap between the two render engines. Okay, at this point, maybe we can also mention that there is a thing called the V-Ray benchmark, which anyone can download for free, mind you. And then you can see how fast your system is compared to other systems that got benchmarked. Obviously, within the benchmark itself, you can select whether you want to benchmark your system using V-Ray or V-Ray GPU. And V-Ray GPU obviously also includes the hybrid mode as well. Now, the benchmark is really useful because for one, you can assess whether your system is working as well as it should. If your system scores considerably lower than a system with a comparable CPU or GPU setup, well then your system might not be working as it should. Do remember though, that you probably want to look at averages instead of highest ranking results because highest ranking results are often overclocked. So do keep that in mind. Additionally, the benchmark can also be useful to assess your upgrade path. So if your CPU, for example, scores about half as much as the CPU you maybe want to upgrade to, well then, as you can imagine, you're probably looking at double the render speed with the upgrade, right? And obviously the same holds true for GPUs as well. All right, okay, so with that, we are concluding this video. As always, we hope you've learned something new about V-Ray here, and we're hoping that you're looking forward to the next video. Now, if by any chance you'd like to get notified about future videos as soon as they get released, well then please do feel free to hit that subscribe button, and also don't forget to turn on your notifications. Also, don't forget, if you have any suggestions for the topics you'd like to see us explore in the future videos, do let us know about them in the comments below this video. We'd appreciate that because then we'll have a better idea about the type of content you all find most interesting and helpful, right? Right. That's about it for this one. Thank you for tuning in.